Hello, I'd like to welcome everyone to Wrangling Your Brand, using brand vectors to give your brand clarity, consensus, and direction. I want to thank all of you for attending today's webcast. Today I'll be covering the importance of clearly defining your brand, using a technique that we use called brand vectors to research and build consensus on your brand, and then how to communicate that brand definition within the organization and then also with any partners that you might use for marketing or advertising. Before we get started, I have the obligatory About Me slide. My name is Steve Robinson. I am the founder of Brilliant Metrics. I have about 15 years of experience with a mixture of technology and marketing. The last few years I've been at a couple of local agencies here in Milwaukee, guiding strategy for both national and local accounts. I teach and serve on the advisory board for the digital marketing program at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee School of Continuing Ed. And I also serve on the boards of the Milwaukee Interactive Marketing Association and EC Council, which is an international organization. I serve on their digital marketing certification program. A little bit about Brilliant Metrics. We're a new consultancy, and our goal is to really buck outdated agency models and marketing models that really serve to create waste in marketing. We lead a push for what we call iterative marketing practices, which focus on learning from past mistakes and successes and really focus more on a long-term strategy than just a campaign-based marketing process. We help clients in a number of capacities, anything from just coming in to help you figure out how to get a handle on measuring your own marketing and advertising return on investment, to acting as a full-fledged virtual CMO. Okay, on to the meat of the presentation here. Why define your brand? Why should we go through this exercise? While your brand is ultimately the perception of your customers or potential customers, it ends up becoming a promise that you're expected to fulfill. And so it's extremely important that you have a handle on what that promise is. Otherwise, everyone within the organization isn't going to be marching in the same direction. It gives everyone in sales and advertising a common ground to sell from and to market from. And then it gives everyone in operations from the group fulfilling the services the basis on the promise that they're supposed to fulfill. If you don't define your brand, you end up with something like this. Now, I don't really follow Playboy, but I'm pretty sure that their brand does not clearly extend to sugar-free energy drinks. I mentioned that the method we were going to cover today is called brand vectors. So I guess it's important that we introduce what a brand vector is. A brand vector represents a particular brand attribute, and we use it to establish your position. And through that position, you either create an affinity with your target audience, or you align with a particular priority of theirs in their purchasing decision. You've probably seen tools similar to this. The key difference here is it's a line, and on either end of the line, you have a believable extreme. So you have two positions that a brand might take along this particular spectrum, and both of them could be reality. It's your job to figure out where your firm sits on this line. And again, you don't necessarily control where your brand sits on this line. That's really dictated by those in the marketplace and how they perceive your brand. I'll give you an example. Your organization may be more casual, not just in dress, but also in the language you use, the way you address clients, or in your use of social media. Your organization could also be more buttoned up, perhaps addressing clients as Mr. So-and-so and never mixing social media with clients and coworkers in your personal life. Your brand lies somewhere on this line. And my question to you is, do you know right now where your brand sits? I'll give you an example of something that isn't a brand vector. Um, in order for a brand vector to be a true brand vector, both ends have to be a believable extreme. They both have to be a position that a firm would take. Now, say this was an accounting firm. You're never going to come across an accounting firm that takes the position of being inaccurate. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't mean all accounting firms are accurate. No, there's some of them that I'm sure that are very sloppy. But none of them are going to go to town promoting their inaccuracies as part of their core brand. So this makes a very poor brand vector because you're never going to have anybody taking a position on the other side. A true brand vector has believable extremes on both sides. It is a continuum, a spectrum between two positions that a brand may take in the marketplace. So here's some examples of good brand vectors. Does your brand value form over function? Do they put aesthetics or style above practicality or efficiency? Or do you really not care what things look like if they get the job done in the most effective or efficient way? Is your brand more plain spoken or sophisticated in your approach and language? We're working with an IT services company right now where part of their DNA is writing and speaking in a very concise, clean manner, even if that means using jargon or more obscure, sophisticated language. Now their competitors are all on the other side. They're all more plain spoken, almost folksy. And their goal is to try and overcome the technical nature of the business they're in and address business owners in a more down-to-earth way. But our client instead is trying to own the fact that they use that more sophisticated language. They want that to be part of the brand because it positions them as a more authoritative source. It positions them as being more premium, top tier, knowing what they're doing a little bit more. Another brand example, are you a brand vector example? Are you more of a safe brand, tried and true, using only the things that you know to work, the age-old principles and practices of your industry? Or are you more on the other end? Are you more progressive, being more hip to industry trends and applying the latest in thought leadership, even if the latest in thought leadership might turn out to be a fad? Are you more corporate, really embracing process and rigid organizational structure? Are you more entrepreneurial, where your employees wear lots of hats and rapid change and a loose structure are things that you embrace? You get the idea of what sort of attributes you can put in a brand vector. And every brand, every organization is different as to what they want to select to make part of their brand. I'll be covering later how to select the attributes that really matter to you. But first, let's cover the two different types of brand vectors. You have value or belief vectors, and you have positioning vectors. Value and belief vectors are what define which individuals are going to have an affinity for your brand. So they define the values, the worldviews, the beliefs that your brand clings to. And based on that alignment with others as they encounter your brand, they may or may not have an affinity towards you. If you are like the gentleman on the left and more casual in how you dress for work, you're going to look for brands that are more casual in how they do business as well. If you are more buttoned up, professional, you're going to be looking to do business with brands that are more buttoned up and professional as well. On the other hand, you have positioning vectors. Positioning vectors really focus on the rational decision-making process that a prospect will be going through when considering your brand. They define how your service offering contrasts with other service offerings in the marketplace. Ultimately, there should be some alignment or agreement between the two. You want to make sure that any values or belief vectors that you have aren't in stark contrast to where you've positioned your product. I want to explore each of these a little bit more in depth. First, I want to talk about the values and beliefs vectors because I think it's really important that you understand where they sit in the process. Values and belief vectors aren't there at all to appeal to the rational mind. These are not things that you think about. Instead, they're really processed by the limbic brain, the part of your brain that processes information before you make a decision. Let's take a look at an example. Okay, your experience, I'm sure, within milliseconds of seeing this woman's face, was probably a very, very strong response. That response was entirely processed by the limbic brain, and it was entirely intuitive. You saw her face, you saw that her hair was dark, but more importantly, you could tell immediately she was angry. You probably saw into the future a little bit too. You sensed that the woman was about to say something or scream something. It was probably rather unkind. You maybe even had a premonition of what she might do next. All of that came into your mind without you having to think about it. You never once told your brain to stop and think about this woman and what she might do. It just happened. Now look at the following math problem. You probably knew immediately this was a multiplication problem, and you probably have some vague intuitive range of reasonable answers. Like you probably know 12,609 is not a valid answer, it's too big, and it's probably bigger than 123, but you don't know that the exact answer isn't 568. The choice was yours on whether or not you wanted to take on this problem, either in your head or on pencil and paper. But your mind didn't automatically start to compute it on its own. Because doing math, at least at this level, outside of 2 plus 2, is beyond the reach of the limbic brain. I stole this exercise from a book by Daniel Kahneman called Thinking Fast and Slow. In his book, Dr. Kahneman calls the limbic system, the part of your brain that you use to quickly assess that angry woman, as System 1. He refers to the rational mind, the part of the mind that you need to do math problems, and the part that you have control over when and how you engage it, as System 2. Now, here's the key part. System 2, that rational mind, the one that you have at least perceived complete control over when and how you engage it, actually isn't in the driver's seat. You think it is, but the truth is that it can only work off of the information that System 1 passes it. If System 1 doesn't offer up an impression, an intuition, a notion, then System 2 isn't going to do anything. And so when you go to make a purchasing decision, it's really System 1 that determines which brands are in your purview. When we look at how our brains process information, particularly the limbic brains, our brains are hardwired to make snap decisions. Just like the snap decisions you made when you saw that angry woman. In particular, we're really good at making these snap decisions about people. If you think about the last time you bought a car and your impressions of the car salesman immediately upon meeting him, or the neighbor that you think is just not quite right, but you don't know why or how. Or if you've had a friend or a family member come to you and ask you for your opinion of their new boyfriend. Your brain was hardwired to make all of those judgments. We do the same thing when evaluating a brand. I'm sure you've all heard the quote from Bob Burg, all things being equal, people do business with and refer business to the people they know, like, and trust. But what if we don't know the person on the other end of the transaction? What if at this point in the buying cycle, we're actually considering a faceless, nameless brand? At that point, our limbic brain, our System 1, immediately does its best to personify that brand and come to a judgment about whether or not we know, like, and trust that brand. And we do that based on the values or beliefs that that brand projects and their alignment with our own, the affinity or lack thereof that is created. And so when we look at our values and beliefs vectors, we're looking to figure out where we want to position our brand or where we want to amplify the position of our brand such that it's going to create an affinity with a prospective buyer before they ever enter the rational buying process. Now contrast that with positioning. Once we've made it past that initial judgment call, and in our prospect's limbic brain has passed on the notion of buying from us to our prospect's rational brain, now positioning vectors are in play. There's even a school of thought that buying decisions are really not even decisions at all, but merely rationalizations of the decision that the limbic brain made prior to even getting to the table. I don't know that that's true, and I think it's probably even less true in B2B circumstances. But I will say this. The brands and organizations I work with have dedicated an awful lot of time to positioning vectors and not a lot of time to their value and belief vectors, which doesn't make a lot of sense if you think about it, because if we're going to believe what science tells us, then the value and belief vectors are what gets us in the running in the first place. And if we don't nail those, then our brand never even comes to the consideration stage where positioning becomes important. Up on the screen you see a picture of two laptops. Both of these are portable computers, but they serve completely different needs from a prospective buyer. This is an example of positioning. Other examples are, you could pull examples from here as far as ruggedness or aesthetics or ease of use, portability, size of screen, processing power. In the case of a service organization, a professional services organization, we're looking at things more like price point. Are we full service or a la carte? Do we offer highly experienced staff, but you pay a premium for them by the hour? Or do we offer lower experienced staff at a lower rate, but things might take a couple extra hours? Those are all examples of positioning vectors. That begs the question, how do you select your vectors? We recommend an open-ended survey. Now, we recommend that you survey your clients, your employees, and if possible, break out of those two groups and get those who have had less exposure to your brand, but still some awareness of your brand. We're not looking for a ton of responses here. We don't need statistical significance on this, nor do we want a ton of responses, because if you glance up at the screen, you'll see these are open-ended questions, which means each one has to be processed and tagged manually in order to develop a core theme or response. So I said we should get your clients, your employees, and if possible, outside those two groups. There are three ways you can get individuals who have had experience with your brand, exposure to your brand, but aren't customers and aren't employees. You can hire a market research firm, which will be the most expensive. You can tap friends, family, friends of friends and family, and social media to try and reach those who have some exposure to your brand but aren't active customers. That can be hard if your brand doesn't have a broad awareness within the average person. What we've done with a lot of success with a number of clients is we've hit up the last 20 or so of their deals that didn't close. So what sales didn't actually result in acquiring a client? Those individuals, those prospects that didn't convert, are ideal for this sort of a survey because they've had exposure to your brand. They know what their first impressions were. But because they didn't convert into customers, you haven't had an opportunity to fix any of those first impressions. So once you've executed the survey, now you can analyze the responses to look for themes around certain brand attributes. So we have a question up there: if a friend or colleague were considering your company, what would you tell them? What do you think about our company? What three words come to mind? When you think about our company, what three words come to mind most prominently? These are going to produce words or themes that are ideal for vectors. We just need to be careful that we don't pull any non-vectors out of the mix. If somebody responds trustworthy, well, you're not going to do business with a non-trustworthy firm. No firm is ever going to shout from the rooftops that they're not trustworthy, and there really isn't a position on the other end of that that makes any sense. Another question that's not up there that can be really valuable, particularly if you're surveying your clients or your not quite clients, is what criteria they would use to make a buying decision with a new vendor today. That'll get to you some of the positioning vectors that you might need to use later. Once you have a set of working vectors, and you can add to these any that you intuitively think are important or would be important to senior leadership, the next step is to sit down and have a brand definition workshop with senior leadership. You're going to want to put these vectors up on the board or up on the screen and have senior leadership select where they see the dot sitting on that line. You'll need to define both endpoints with them clearly so they understand what the different ends, the different believable extremes are for that vector. But after that, try and build some consensus amongst the group on where the dot sits. And more importantly, talk about why it sits there or how you fulfill that particular brand promise. Now, this doesn't actually give you a clear idea of where your brand is, because remember, your brand is defined by the perceptions of those outside your organization. But it tells you where senior leadership sees your brand being, and it tells you where senior leadership wants your brand to be. And I think those are very important things. The next step is to add competitors to your brand vectors. So you want to take a look at maybe 2 to 4 competitors and use the same 4 as you go through and update each individual vector, adding dots for those competitors. The position doesn't need to be exact. A best guess works here, but obviously the more information you have, the better. Sources for this information include if you had an employee recently jump ship from one of the competitors. You can meet with anybody who's in the front line of sales and business development and what they're seeing in the marketplace as they go out to sell, when they've come head to head, what the differences were. And I also recommend that you take a deep dive into the competitors' websites, social media presence, and job postings. In particular, job postings. I've found some of the greatest nuggets of information about how a brand perceives their own culture within a job posting, and the type of talent they're trying to bring on board, which then comes out and reflects in their external brand. When you're selecting the competitors, take a look. You're probably looking for competitors that maybe they represent a subset of your overall competition, a group of like-minded companies. Or maybe there's a competitor in the marketplace that has a really strong, well-defined brand presence. You might also look at including a brand that you regularly go head-to-head with in sales opportunities. Once you have your firm plotted on all of your brand vectors and your competitors all plotted on your brand vectors, now it's time to whittle down the set. And so how do you select which brand vectors you want to focus on? Because the next step is to test them. So how do you know which ones to test? Well, you're looking for the brand vectors where either your firm is on an extreme, the dot is pushed all the way to the left or the right, or where your dot is pushed far away from the competitors. If you don't have either of those two situations or enough of them, you're looking for spots where at least all of the competitors' dots, or most of them, are off to the left or the right of your dot. That shows that you've skewed one way away from the competition. You're looking for the values that are the strongest and the most fervent within the organization as well. Once you've selected the important vectors, once you've whittled them down to a set that you want to work with, the next step is to determine, okay, when senior leadership placed that dot, is that really where that dot is? And so now it's time to test. It's time to test if that position is authentic. We talk about authenticity, and I'm going to show you an example of an inauthentic brand. Now, I happen to be from Milwaukee, so I have a little bit of an inside track on this, but I can tell you authoritatively that Milwaukee's Best is about the worst beer you can get from Milwaukee. The fact that they have a premium version of their beer just makes me either laugh or perhaps cry as I worry about what others' impressions of Milwaukee's beer scene is. The words best and premium are clearly not authentic brand attributes. This beer does not live up to those two terms. So how do you find out if you're living up to the brand vectors, the positions on the brand vectors that your senior leadership has identified? You go back to your clients and your employees and those that you can survey outside the organization and its clients and ask. I happen to really like Survey Gizmo for this because they have a nice slider that's really fluid and does a great job of visually representing a brand vector. When you do create your survey, it's really important that you define both ends of the brand vector so that the respondent doesn't have to guess at what the word magical means in this case or transparent. It's spelled out for them. You'll also want to make sure that you tweak this language and so that it's different if you're sending it to employees or if you're sending it to clients or if you're sending it to those who have had a lighter touch with the organization. In this case, you're surveying your employees to learn what it is you're living. What position on that brand vector do your employees live when they're acting within the company? You survey your customers to learn what they experience. And ideally, you're serving others who have had smaller or lighter touches with the brand to learn what their first impressions were, what their feelings were towards the brand, the impressions that they got, but haven't had a chance to test because they're not actually customers. Again, I recommend with this and the previous survey that you work with an outside firm to administer the survey. And the reason for that is twofold. One, if you work with an outside firm, when you guarantee anonymity, now you have an opportunity to back that up. Because even if you guarantee anonymity with an in-house survey, chances are pretty good most of the respondents are not going to trust that the survey is actually not anonymous. But if you do it with an outside firm, not everybody's going to trust that it's anonymous, but a large percentage will. The other advantage to doing this with an outside firm instead of doing it internally is when you send an in-house survey and you're asking for people's impression of your brand, they're going to want to answer in a way that parrots back what they've been told, because they're going to want to tell you what they think you want to hear. So any messaging that you've done from an internal communications perspective around the brand is what you're going to get back when you do an in-house survey to the employees. Any messaging that you've done externally, either during that sales process or during the your day-to-day ongoing relationship with your customers, is what you're going to get from your customers and those non-customers alike. So if you can, use an outside firm. If you can't, in-house is still better than no survey at all. You can still get some valuable data. When you get that data back, what you're going to find out is that not all of those positions that senior leadership took are authentic. those positions that are not authentic are what are called aspirational. Sometimes these gaps can be staggering, and it's surprising to see exactly to what extent senior leadership seems to be out of touch with reality. It's less that they're out of touch, it's more that this is their vision, and their vision is just not being enacted. Aspirational vectors are not a bad thing. It just means that there's some work that needs to be done to close the gap between where perception is and where you want perception to be. The only way you can close that gap is to change reality. And that means promoting internally first. That means enacting change within the organization first to make sure that before you try and change the promise, that you change the action. Once the shift has occurred internally and you're confident that you're living the position that you want to promote, now you can go and promote that and try and change the hearts and minds of the general of folks outside the organization, your customers and non-customers alike. It's also really important that you follow up with measurement, because it doesn't do any good to do all of this effort and not have a feedback loop to tell you if the effort's working. And you want to know when that vector is no longer aspirational and it's now reality. Sometimes either you or senior leadership will recognize an opportunity to create an aspirational vector because they want to capitalize on an opportunity to differentiate within the market. This can work, but I want to throw some caution out there. In order for this to work, first of all, the rest of your brand has to be pretty darn authentic. You have to have nailed the rest of your dots when you've done your survey. The reason being, as you try and move perception from where the dot is to where you want the dot to be, it's going to be in flux, which means this particular attribute of your brand is going to be all over the place for a while. If the rest of your brand is a little bit all over the place, it'll make your whole brand basically meaningless. So you want to make sure that if you're going to consciously move a dot, that you're doing it in a controlled manner and the other attributes are pretty firm on where they sit. The other thing is that this really needs to be clearly communicated to the entire company as a brand pivot or change. We are changing our position as an organization, and here's why. Here is the benefit. And here's why you need to change your actions to align. You need a communication plan in place to make sure that the messages around this change are reinforced, because one time isn't going to cut it. And then finally, you need to have some measurement in place so you have a feedback loop to know whether or not the dot's moving and if it's moving in the right direction. So that requires regular surveys. So once you've nailed down your brand, once your brand vectors, you know where you sit, both in reality and where senior leadership would like you to be. You know which attributes are aspirational, which vectors are not. Now it's time to put together a communication plan. The first thing you need to do is figure out how you're going to communicate the brand to employees. And we don't recommend taking the brand vectors and promoting them visually to your employees. The problem with doing that is that then you have to explain both of the believable extremes in detail, and you have to explain what the heck a branding vector is to all of your employees, and that takes too long. Instead, we recommend taking the content from the brand vectors, adding some value to it, and distilling it down into a brand manifesto, for lack of a better term. The easiest way we found to do that is to take 1 to 3 talking points from each vector. You're not just looking for the position of the dot on that vector, but also the why and how that position exists. Then you take all of your talking points and you organize them into 4 categories. Who is the brand? Why does the brand exist? How does the brand deliver? And what does the brand offer? The who is the personality of the brand. This is what creates that affinity. It's what that limbic brain is going to process before you ever get to process anything rationally. The why gets to the overall mission, the theme, the greater purpose of the brand. This is usually an emotional pull. In the case of Brilliant Metrics, our why is that we believe that marketing doesn't need to be a wasteful endeavor, and we're out to eliminate that waste. The how focuses on how your brand will deliver on that why. What is your secret sauce? What are your differentiators? And the what is the most boring part. Now, I don't want you to neglect the what. You need to put a little bit of work into it because you want to make sure that you're not focusing on the services you provide, but instead focusing on the needs of your customers that you are meeting with those services. So I'll give you an example. Just this week, we went through this exercise with an IT services company, the one I referred to earlier. And I'm just going to read to you what came out of that longer manifesto. This document may never see the light of day within the companies as it's written, but it will be the basis for a large-scale communications effort for all employees. We'll start with the who. We are sophisticated minimalists. We use just enough of the right words to say exactly what we mean. Our solutions, presentations, and work product are clean, clear, and concise. Never elitist, we make sure to remain humble and respectful towards our clients and each other. We are teachers and learners. Our technologists take time and effort to share knowledge freely with clients and the team for the betterment of both. We are nimble and progressive, taking the latest technology trends and incorporating them seamlessly into our day-to-day. We have style. We do things well and we look good in the process, with the perfect balance of form and function. Okay, now I'll move on to the why. We use technology to open doors. Opportunity is what drives us, both in using the latest technology to create new business opportunities for our clients and in creating opportunities for us as technology advisors to better ourselves. Now the how. We believe the best way to deliver opportunity to our clients is to deliver opportunity within the company. Our technology advisors are constantly working to better themselves and better each other through training and knowledge sharing. We pride ourselves on our refined process and procedure, and every team member is responsible for process improvement. Our business grows through the personal and professional growth of the technology advisors on our team. And finally, the what. We see technology as a driver for success. We help our clients use technology as an asset to increase profit, improve service, and differentiate from competitors. We do this by collaborating with our clients to produce highly customized solutions, applying the latest technologies. We manage the details in the day-to-day, keeping the time our clients spend on technology focused on using technological innovation to drive their business forward. So this content becomes the basis for targeted communication to all employees and potential hires to get everybody rallied behind a central brand and a central goal. It gets all of the ants marching in the same direction. So now that you have your manifesto, now you can break that down and distill it into even smaller chunks and promote those chunks internally in a way that is always in front of your employees or is very easily referenceable by your employees. So you can create signage or posters, wallet cards. We've seen little stand-ups that sit on everybody's desk, stickers. You can have fun with it. You also want to make sure that you update your job posting boilerplate to make sure that you're attracting talent that aligns with your brand. We recommend you hold a kickoff to distribute these materials and really rally the employees around the central brand. Only after you've rolled out the brand internally can you focus your efforts on how your organization presents itself externally. The first thing you want to do is start by making sure that all of your externally facing materials, and more importantly, the tools that you use to create those materials, now align with the clearly defined brand. So you want to start with the tools, your written style guide, your visual brand standards, your content calendar. You want to make sure that all of those things align with the brand as you've defined it. And then go back and audit all of the individual materials that are out there. So your website, your homepage copy. If you don't have a Why Us page, you need a Why Us page that clearly spells all of this stuff out. Check your sales collateral, brochures, PowerPoint presentations. And in each case, take the time to either mentally or literally plot where each piece sits on each vector. So you can take a look at, say, a brochure and say that this brochure is a little bit left of our dot on the formal-informal vector, right? Once you've taken the effort of going through all of your materials, now you need to put together a reference, a tool for everybody going forward to do the same. So you want to communicate to anybody else who is marketing the brand. This includes outside copywriters. This includes if you're working with an agency. This includes anybody who's doing advertising for you, media buying. It also includes your sales organization in many cases, because often they're putting together PowerPoint presentations or putting together sales letters and other collateral that also needs to align. So you want to get them on the same page as well. You should select the top 5 value or belief vectors and as many of the position vectors as you need, and put them actually in the book, visually represented, along with your competitors, along with descriptions about each of the believable extremes. That way, anybody else who's involved in working with the brand externally has an opportunity to bounce their materials, their work product, against the same vectors that you did when you did your audit. Hold a meeting to walk through each one and explain how to use the tool to do exactly that. And while you're at it, include your written style guide and your visual brand identity in the same book so that all of your materials are in the same place. Okay, I want to thank everyone for attending today. If you have any questions, please go ahead and type them in the box. I have a couple questions here that came in while we were conducting the webinar. Jamie asks, what if the results you get back from the vector survey are all over the place? And this happens. It especially happens with younger brands or companies with silos within them where part of the company is acting one way, another part is acting another way. It also happens after recent mergers and acquisitions. I would, do your best to focus on where there is some consistency. And you also want to look at your silos independently. So if you can find a split where this half of the business is one way and the other half of the business is the other way, look at them independently and then consciously pick a direction to go. And you need to work with senior leadership and make sure they're aware of the divisions between their organization and work with them to move forward. Okay, Elsa asks, is there anything we need to do after the brand launch to maintain the brand? Yes, you want to conduct at least annual brand surveys with both open-ended questions, and you want to include sliders, both in the same survey, so you're not over-surveying your population. So you want sliders for each brand vector and the open-ended questions. And then you want to take that data and regroup with senior leadership on a yearly basis just to make sure that if any dots have moved, that they're aware of why and how and whether or not that's something that we want to own or if we want to try and push the dots back where we want them. If we're going to push the dots back where we want them, that becomes then an internal communications effort and an external communications effort to make sure that that happens. If you have any aspirational vectors, you want to be watching those probably more often than annually, just to see if they're moving. So maybe every 6 months or so. Okay, it looks like that's it for questions. If you have any feedback on this webinar, please do reach out. And if you want to learn more about Brilliant Metrics or contact us, you can go to brilliantmetrics.com. If you want to reach me directly, my email address is steve@brilliantmetrics.com, or you can hit me up on Twitter at Steve Robinson. Thank you all very much for your time. I really appreciate it. I hope you got some value out of this webcast, and I hope to see you at the next one.